I am very excited about the turnout. I told a couple people this week that I had a lofty goal of getting 20 people here, and I have way more than that. I was hoping for at least 10, because then you have a captive audience, but I'm excited to have you all here. For those of you that haven't been here, I think most of you have been here, but we are a physical therapy clinic at large, but myself and my coaches, most of which are here today, are the performance side of things. We do all the personal training, group training, strength and conditioning with the high school. Brandy, our other coach, is the powerlifting coach at the high school, so we focus a lot on the health and fitness aspect. But for me personally, I went to MSU. I've been training, working out for over 10 years, probably closer to 12 at this point, and it's been a huge passion of mine to teach people about nutrition. So not only from myself, as I was more on the opposite end, where I was like 120 pounds soaking wet with a jacket on and a pair of mud boots. I was always the scrawny one, so I had this desire to build a lot of muscle, get stronger. I quit sports and just focused on really lifting weights more towards the end of high school. But then I went to college, thought I was going to be an engineer, quickly realized that even though I could do math, I didn't really want to do math. So I switched focus, went into kinesiology, and started learning, because honestly, I was in engineering classes. The only thing I could think about was lifting weights, eating like food. What was the thing that was going to help me do the best with that? And I looked around and I just saw so many people that I felt like could benefit from learning how to eat better and lifting weights, and I saw the impact that it had on me. So that became my purpose, my mission, like my passion is to teach others how to live a healthy lifestyle. It's changed my life, it's changed a lot of my family members' lives, and at this point we're hundreds of clients deep into it changing their life. So this is just another step for me to be able to take that to more people, and hope that you guys pass this information on to the ones that you have at home, that you're close to, that you see that could deal with this. I could go on for a while about this, but our health, especially just here in America, has gone down so much, and not only the course of my life, but even for the past 50 to 70 years, it's really started to take a turn for the worse. So my hope today is that I can get kind of clear, give you guys a clear vision as to what actually shows good nutrition, what's important for you guys to focus on. There's a lot of stuff out there that you're going to see that says to do this, do that. A lot of it might work, might not work for you. So I want to simplify things and give you guys a clear plan for, okay, here's the types of foods we should be eating, here's maybe how much I should be eating, and not worry about all the crazy things you see online. So with that, we'll kind of get started. I also encourage a lot of questions, so if you guys have something that is pertinent to what we're going through right then and you want to ask about it, I'm happy to go with that. If not, just kind of write things down and we can do a little Q&A at the end where I just answer your guys' questions. So we got as much time as we need. So to start, the first few pages are just an outline. I have some based on who we are, the team of coaches that we have, but we'll start with the body composition stuff. So with this, for all of our clients that we bring on, we start with body, we call it body move work. So we do a body composition analysis. We go through a movement screen, head to toe, to just see where their baseline for movement is at. And then we do a cardiovascular test. So those of you that participated in the body composition, that was what we just did there. So with this, I have some reference ranges that we'll go through, but your weight obviously is just measured in pounds. The way the scale, I guess I could start there, how the scale works. So it's got these electrode pads on them and the handle, and what it does is it sends a signal from one side of the body to the other and then cross references. And if you think about electricity, it's going to move faster through water, slower through fat. So fat-based things versus water-based. And the speed at which that does that, it calculates how much muscle mass you have. So your muscles are mostly water weight. And then, so it'll go faster through that. And they standardize those to some of the really fancy machines. So that one is in the high 90% accurate to where your body composition sits. Things that will mess that up. So some of the group came off of a workout this morning. That's going to shift it a little bit because they lost some water weight through sweating. If you have caffeine, if it's not first thing in the morning. So it's a good baseline, but the ideal measurement is first thing in the morning when you've kind of gone to the bathroom, haven't consumed much, haven't worked out. So for this, what we're really looking at here is your body fat and your skeletal muscle mass. So body fat percentage and muscle mass are better indicators than BMI weight measurements alone because they take into account what your body composition is. And really what we want is a high level of muscle mass and a lower level of body fat. So this is something I have to talk to people about a lot because everyone tends to come in with a weight goal of, well, I want to be 130 pounds. And then I'm always like, well, what does that mean? And we start to ask some questions around it because you could be 130 pounds, have 50% body fat, maybe not that high, but could be up to that high and then have no muscle mass. Well, you don't really have much health or function there. So these are the measurements I like to look at, and they show us a lot better because you could even stay at the same weight for a long time, but you might increase 5 pounds muscle and drop a couple percent body fat. So with this, body fat percentage for women, we're looking in the 18 to 25% range as a long-term goal is what we consider to be healthy. For men, you can be as low as 8% up to around 16% body fat. Now, if you're within a couple points of that, no big deal, but that's generally speaking the reference range. And then for skeletal muscle mass, that number seems low for those of you that did it because we're not accounting for lean muscle mass, which is your bones, your tendons, ligaments, all of the other tissues that are there that are not fat mass. So lean muscle mass would be a little bit higher, but skeletal muscle mass specifically, we're looking for 40 to 50%. So for women, we tend to carry a little bit less body, or not a little bit less muscle mass relative to men. So probably 40 to 45% is a really good goal. For men, I do try to push them upwards towards that 50% mark. And to calculate that, you just take your the muscle mass, that skeletal muscle mass number relative to your weight. And then that'll give you a percentage that we're at. So if that's a little bit lower, we're looking to increase that body fat wise, looking to bring that down as needed. While today is going to focus a lot on nutrition and the ways that we can utilize nutrition to become healthier, change our body composition, a lot of other things, the big stimulus for changing your body composition does need to come from resistance training. So we need the raw materials through the nutrition, the protein, all the other stuff we'll talk about, but you also, if you don't have the stimulus of lifting weights, making those muscles have to adapt and grow, it is going to be harder for you to change your body composition. So just something to keep in mind. Running, jogging, walking, the cardiovascular side of things is great for burning overall calories, has lots of health benefits, but the nutrition and the resistance training is what has been shown to improve the body composition the most. Is there any questions over that before I move on from body composition and why we're looking at that? So relative muscle mass, I didn't fill that out. That is when you, I'm trying to think, divide the skeletal muscle mass by your total body weight. That'll give you the relative percentage. And that's what I was talking about. We want somewhere like north of 40% as a long-term goal. Yes, yeah, I would expect your muscle mass to be slightly lower. Well, So the next couple pages here, goal setting. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important. I took this from one of the articles I had written a while back. You can decide you want to do something, but if you don't have a goal set around it and you don't make those goals specific, measurable, like timely, they're going to be hard for you to stay on track with over time. So a little bit on the goal setting, you guys can kind of read through that. The biggest thing when I have people set goals and what I go into when I'm doing consults is what drives people. What's your passion? What's your purpose? Like, who are you living for? What are you living for? Like, those type of questions you want to answer, because simply looking at something as, well, I want to hit this weight or I want to be this body composition, at the end of the day tends to be not as meaningful as I want to be healthy for my grandkids as I get older, or for my kids, or for your spouse, or somebody that means something to you or something bigger than you. So keep those in mind when you're setting goals, and try to link that goal you have to a bigger meaning in your life, because those are the times where I find it to really stick with people, and it's a good reminder when you have those days that you just don't want to do it, because we all do. I've done this for a long time. I still don't always want to work out. I say that to Austin probably twice a week. I go to train, I'm like, I don't want to do this. But when you think about the reason why you're doing it, it gets a little bit easier to keep moving forward. So I just like to throw that out there. So when we get into the nutrition itself, first I want to touch on what an ideal human diet is. And this is kind of something we always say a lot, and anybody that's asked me a question in here, I probably tell you it depends before I actually give you an answer, and then I spend a lot of time giving you lots of context around it before I inevitably still land on it depends. So there is no one-size-fits-all diet, and this is very much just a marketing scheme that you guys are seeing, where you have vegan diets, carnivore diets, plant-based diet, keto diet, Mediterranean diet, whatever these diets are. They're marketing schemes. They're trying to tell you that what they're doing is absolutely the best, and you need to follow us. And then also, after you follow us, don't forget to check out all these supplements and these products and these other things that we sell that are really going to be what gets you there, not just the diet. Well, they're just trying to get money out of you. So I don't like saying one size fits all, or there's the one size fits all diet, because the context of your life matters. Like, where are you currently at? What do you have, any diseases, conditions going on? What are your goals? How old are you? What's your activity levels? There's so many things that play into it. And really, all these fad diets you see online, the main thing they're doing is just reducing your calories, which will lead to short-term weight loss and not being sustainable long-term. And then you will find yourself 3-6 months ballooning back up to wherever you were, if not more, being frustrated, thinking that you're a failure. So I want to cut through that and give you guys just real principles to follow when you're developing your diet. So 2 things, there's one rule I have, and then 2 outcomes. So if you're following the rule plus the other stuff, we'll give more context around it. But the main thing that your diet needs to do is eating real food. Like, that has to be the underlying principle. For some people, that'll be more vegetables. Some people, that'll be more meat. Some people, it'll be more fruit. It doesn't matter where you kind of land on that continuum, but the base has to be eating real food, staying away from processed food, bagged food, boxed food, restaurant food, fast food. Any of that type of stuff is not going to get you there. It has to be the base of eating real food. And if you do that, you're going to have 2 outcomes. You're going to improve your vitality, and you're going to maintain a healthy body composition. So again, these aren't goals, they're just outcomes. They're byproducts of the process of eating real food and having these other goals that are bigger than just the outcomes. But you do need to be hitting those outcomes, because that is kind of a signifier that what you're doing is working. So what do I mean by vitality? This is physical strength, mental energy, focus, excitement towards life, like all of these things where you really feel better, like your overall well-being feels better. And yes, we're talking about food, but I have a few things I'll touch on later. I might just not even go in order of what I have, so my brain just kind of goes on a lot of tangents. But your mental well-being should be better when you're eating better, when you're exercising. And this is more tangible when you guys think about exercise. Like, how many of you have ever been through a workout and thought, like, man, I wish I wouldn't have worked out today? You don't do that, right? You get done with your workout and you feel better, you have more energy. But how many of you have had a meal where you're like, I wish I wouldn't have done that? Everyone, right? Like, you have those times where you're eating that meal and it just brings you down. You don't feel great. You start getting bad thoughts. You're tired. You're bloated. You don't feel good. So your nutrition should help you feel better in all aspects, mentally, physically. So that should be an outcome. And then maintaining healthy body composition. If we're eating well, we're exercising, your body composition will change over time. It's a long-term process, and it's not something that happens really quick, so we have to be patient with that. But over the course of a year, 2, 3 years of really doing this and making it a priority in your life, your body composition will start to move in the right direction. At the bottom of that page, I have the reference ranges for the relative muscle mass and body fat percentages on there. So next, I want to touch on calories. So this has been, I mean, everyone's heard the calories in versus calories out. If you want to lose weight, you got to eat less calories than you burn. Kind of. So and what I see a lot, and I've been talking to some of my newer coaches about this too, as they're working through nutrition with their clients, is the amount of women specifically that have come to me that are between 40 and 60 years old and cannot lose weight. They just can't. They have way more body fat than they would like, and they're struggling. Every single one of them is eating way less calories than what I would actually want them to be at. I just went through this the other day based on this person we were working with and her body composition numbers. If I recall right, it put as her caloric burn throughout the day was about 3,000 calories based on the metrics that we go through. She gave us a food log. She was eating 1,200 calories a day. So she was in an 1,800 calorie deficit, and for 5, 6, 8 years has not been able to lose a single pound. That's defeating. That's very frustrating. Like, where do you go from there? And then you start to dive into like the other side of how are they feeling, what like mentally, physically, all this type of stuff, and awful, right? You don't have enough calories in to hardly function, but your goal is to lose weight, and that's not happening either. So the reason I'm saying this is because calories matter to an extent, but the most important thing is that we have nutrients in our diet. Like, our foods need to be nutrient dense, which comes from whole foods. The whole foods have all the nutrients in there. When you look at processed foods and it says like, oh, it's got this percent of all these vitamins, those are just no different than supplements. They just literally pour them in. Like, they don't have to be accountable to them. You're not getting any of those nutrients. They're going right through you. You're peeing them out on the back end, and they're not actually absorbing into your body because of nature did it best. They have food packaged there with the nutrients in there. Part of the food you're eating actually helps you absorb the nutrients that you're getting. So, needless to say, we don't have a calorie in, calorie out issue nearly as much as we have a nutrient density issue. And your body composition is a function of how many nutrients you have. And this plays out all the time when I see people, I talk to them. I can tell pretty quick whether or not they have a lot of nutrients in their diet or if they don't. And we'll talk a little bit more as I go on as to what that looks like. But when it comes to calories, generally speaking, protein has 4 calories per gram, carbs have 4 calories per gram, fats have 9 calories per gram. These things are important to at least know because we do develop some meal plans around them. But again, not the most important part. You have to have nutrients in your diet as well. So, if anyone's followed my emails, listened to me talk, this will not be new news to you, but we are going to talk about prioritizing protein. Yes, ma'am. It's just in that top paragraph there. I don't think I actually wrote it down anywhere. It's right in that first paragraph of the calories. Protein fats have 4 calories per gram, and then fats have 9, protein carbs are at 4. So, prioritizing protein, again, I'm a broken record on this, but it is the most essential aspect. Our body is made off of protein. From our muscles to our cells to all the enzymes that work in there. We make our neurotransmitters. We grow our skin, hair, nails. It does all of our growth, repair, function. Everything is based on protein, and it is an essential nutrient. Protein and fat, I'll talk about fat a little bit later, but those are 2 nutrients that if you do not consume in your diet, you will die very fast, or you will have a complete degradation of your health. So it has to be the focus of our diet, and it's something that if I can get people to focus on anything at the beginning, it's just hitting a certain number of protein grams per day. And what happens too is when a lot of times, again, I'll look at people's meal logs that they send me, and they might be getting 50, 60, 75 grams of protein a day. And they end up putting themselves into a spot where they can't build muscle. They can't repair their skin, their hair, their nails. Like you'll see people's nails cracking, or their skin will not heal very well. You'll get a cut and it takes forever to heal. Like all of this is a product of not having enough nutrients in your body to facilitate that growth and repair. So what happens is when we eat that little protein is our body has to spare the protein for essential functions like your heart and your liver and your brain and all of your organs. So it can no longer move nutrients out into the periphery. It has to keep them close because that's all it's got for the day. So that's when you start to see all of the decline through muscle mass, skin, hair, nails, those type of things. And also a lot of the protein that we eat, especially if it's coming from animal products, that's where we get a lot of our nutrients as well. So it's not just the protein molecules themselves, but all the other nutrients that are associated with the protein as well. So if you have these nutrient deficiencies, if you're low on protein, you're going to run into mental health issues. I think when we look at it, depression, people that have depression, a lot of times it goes right with having low protein diets. Obesity, just because of the body composition issues that we have, so we're not stimulating muscle mass, immune function, loss of bone mass, chronic fatigue, other mood disorders are all highly linked with low protein, also low fat diets as well. So basically, humans, to thrive, we have to have the raw materials, and if we have low protein diets, we're not going to be getting enough of those raw materials in. So prioritize your protein. The next part about this is not only prioritizing your protein, but picking high quality protein sources. So this is one thing that I've been also a big stickler on is animal proteins have the greatest form of bioavailability for us. This is not, and this is one of the issues I take with some of the fad diets is animal proteins, this has been long established in scientific literature. I can send you tons of papers if you wanted to read them. When we take beef, chicken, pork, eggs, dairy, all of these main animal sources, they are 0.9 to 1.1, which basically means if you have a gram of protein coming in, how much of that goes into your bloodstream. And they're no less than 0.9. There might be maybe one that's like 0.8. to 1. So you're almost getting all of that protein into your bloodstream, which is essential because that's how we utilize it. If it's going into our digestive tract and it's just going out the back end, not that important. When we look at protein from plant products, a lot of them, especially like nut seeds that we talk about have protein, like they're like 0.2 to 0.4. These are much lower. I have some charts. If anyone is interested, I can always send you guys those later, but the plant proteins are very low. So, and this is one thing that I think we've been kind of lied to, misled from like plant-based vegan diets, and I don't want to make this me saying like that you shouldn't be doing that or it's terrible for you, but it has been misleading to make people think that they don't need as much protein and that they can get all the protein that they want from the plant-based sources. But the literature and just anecdotally looking at people that follow those type of diets, it's just not working. And you'll have that initial benefit of the reduction in calories, which will show you some progress. But when we look at long-term sustainability, it's just not there. So it doesn't mean that we can't have plants in our diet. Plants are fine. There's a lot of benefits that can come from plants. But when we look at the protein that we need day to day, it has to come from a lot of animal products, meats, eggs, dairy, those type of things. And there, at the bottom there's a few of the essential nutrients that we acquire more from animal products like B vitamins, vitamin A, some of these other ones that are really essential for our brain function, immune function. There's plenty more, but that was just the highlights of those. Yeah, so protein powders are okay. You have to look at the amino acid content in them. I think from a plant-based, like hemp protein powders have shown to be a higher digestibility, and they have a complete amino acid profile. But typically, if people tolerate whey proteins, I just go for that. There's a couple brands that I have found that are very minimal ingredients that do pretty well digestively. So I think the protein powders are fine, especially if you are having a tough time eating that much meat or eggs throughout the day. A protein powder can bridge that gap and get you a good 20, 30 more grams of protein in a day. So I definitely think they're good. But again, as a complement to also eating meat, because you're not going to get all the nutrients from that. That one is more of just the protein itself. You're not getting the micronutrients along with it. Most of them won't say anything as far as amino acid content. That's you kind of have to look at that on the back end through literature papers. But what I had said to her is that from plant-based protein powders, the hemp protein is what I've seen to be the best as far as having complete amino acid profile. One thing that I do want to touch on too, because this is a big talking point from the plant-based side of things, is that well, if we look at some of these animals, these big cows that have tons of muscle mass, well, they're only eating plants. So how are they possibly getting all of that protein to build the muscle off of that? And it comes down to our digestive tract. So plants have the nutrients in there. We just can't access them. So when we, as well, so we can access some of them. But ruminants, like cows, they have multiple stomachs. So what happens when they graze all day long is that they're fermenting this food over and over and over to the point where it's so broken down that they can upcycle those nutrients into their bloodstream. But for us, with a very small stomach, we have a long intestinal tract, but we don't have that fermentation process that really breaks down those plants to upcycle the nutrients, which is also why when we eat the meat, we get those nutrients from the animals because they've already kind of done the hard part for us. So just something to kind of note there. The next few pages, we go over sourcing and benefits. So on this page, I have them ranked from kind of like highest quality, in my opinion, to lowest quality. So wild game is at the top for me just because they don't have farming practices. Their exposure to contamination is likely less because they're out living a natural life. Not everyone's going to have access to that. But from there, beef, bison, buffalo, red meats are probably the second best, which is really the most accessible to us. I put in there grass-fed if available. We don't have a lot of studies at the moment to show a huge benefit or difference between conventional raised and grass-fed raised meat, but to me, I think that we're not looking at the right things. I think in long term, we're going to start to see a difference from the fact that conventionally raised, like some of these animals are stuck in feedlots all the time. They're not in a good environment. So for me, it's partially a ethical reason as to I think grass-fed animals tend to live a better life. And also, I think over time, we're going to see that the grass-fed animals they're not as sick, they're healthier, so we're probably going to benefit more from eating meat from animals that were healthier. But cost is a factor there, or accessibility. So if it comes down to you eating meat or not eating meat, like eat the conventional raised, get as much local as you can, but that's still going to be better than not eating it at all. Eggs, salmon, really like 2 through 4 to me are all interchangeable. I think that getting these, they have a lot of the different fats, micronutrients, things that we need are going to be great. Chicken, poultry, pork are a little bit lower down on the list for me because most of what you're getting in the stores of that are raised off corn, soybeans, wheat. That's it. Like they don't live very good lives. They have poor nutrients, and they have similar digestive tracts to us as well. So they don't do as well digesting those grains as a cow would. And some of that plays out into the fat content that's in their meat. They also are a little bit lower for healthy fats and some of the micronutrients as well. So they're not bad if that's what it's going to take to get you to eat meat. Again, the point is to prioritize protein, pick the ones that you're going to do the best with, because that's still most important. I just like to kind of explain why I order them the way I do. Dairy is on there as well. Greek yogurt is going to be one of the best as far as protein sources go, but you still get a decent amount of protein from hard cheeses and things like that. But that one definitely shouldn't be like a main protein source outside of like Greek yogurt. It can be really good. Absolutely. So what I do, and I actually put a recipe in the back of there. We buy whole milk, the full fat, whole milk, plain Greek yogurt. So nothing's been done to it. It's just made into Greek yogurt. It's very tart, but we'll take, especially for my boys, we'll put a little bit of like honey or maple syrup in there to sweeten it ourselves. Sometimes a splash of vanilla and then berries, and they love it. It tastes pretty good, but you can cut out all of the other stuff if you're worried more so about like not getting your sugar too high, which again I'll talk about why that might not be ideal. Then you could just reduce the amount of that, just go for the berries instead of the honey or maple syrup or something like that in there. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair. I wouldn't have ever thought of that. Okay. Benefits. I probably went over most of these, but appetite suppression I haven't gone over yet. When you have enough protein in your diet, so a lot of us can relate to this, and I try not to go too many tangents about processed food companies, but they drive me insane. We've been told for years to eat cereal in the morning, like that's a great breakfast for you. Literally no protein, just carbs. And how many times, especially for parents, like if you gave your kid a bowl of cereal and then in 30, 45 minutes later they're coming back to you and they're like, I'm hungry, or they're getting angry or starving, and they have no protein in their diet. So protein, because of how satiating it is from the nutrient density aspect, because it's not calorically as dense. Like it actually, you get less calories from eating 4 ounces of steak than you do a lot of other foods, but it has so many nutrients in there that you satiate your appetite. So this is why we talk a lot about, like, at your first meal of the day, trying to get somewhere between 30 and 50 grams of protein in. And the changes that people see throughout the rest of their day, their carb cravings go down. They have a lot more energy. They feel like just focused. And that comes from the appetite suppression aspect of protein. It also increases your metabolism because proteins are more complex. They're harder to break down. We have to put more work into digesting them, which actually helps you burn more calories on the back end. Increases muscle mass, lean body mass, bone density, connective tissue, helps improve your recovery. So that's just from the stuff above, because you're giving your body those raw materials. You can recover from exercise or anything you need to recover from better. Hormone production, immune function, blood pressure, other blood markers. So overall, with protein, we're looking at 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of ideal body weight each day. So really, when we do body composition measures and we have your muscle mass, we want to base it more off of that. So if you have your lean muscle mass that you can calculate from your body composition, I typically go like 1 to 1.2 grams from that lean muscle mass or that lean body mass, and that gives you a better estimate. But if you haven't done the body composition or you don't know, around 1 gram per pound of body weight is ideal. If you know that you have a little bit more body mass than you'd like, then you could go based off of something that's more, seems like an ideal body weight for you. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Sure. I've been writing a lot and sending out emails quite a bit recently about that. So I'll point you in the direction of some of those towards the end. But the symptoms that you're experiencing during menopause are heightened, right? So if you're having hot flashes, mood swings, digestive issues, whatever the case is, what we want to do with these is turn down the dial. So I'm not going to say that we can eliminate all of those symptoms that come from it, but what we're doing is taking the dial and just turning it so it's quieter. And there's lots of studies to show that when you work on this type of stuff, that it helps to reduce those symptoms, severity, and intensity of them. But from the regular, just your physiology, all of these numbers, the benefits still apply even after menopause. And if anything, sometimes they can be more essential just for what hormone production you do have left, making sure that you have the available nutrients for that. The one thing that changes the most, I think, when we look at people that are perimenopausal or menopausal is your overall caloric burn throughout the day starts to go down. So your basal metabolic rate will decrease. So a lot of times we'll see that women start to put on put on weight, body fat, when they haven't changed anything. Everything stayed completely the same, and then you start to go through menopause and you're accumulating body fat and you have no idea why. Well, you might not have changed anything in your diet, but your basal metabolic rate decreased. And if that decreased by 200 to 500 calories, now you've actually started consuming way more. And that's where sometimes calories do matter. So we have to adjust for that. But that's probably the biggest change that we see when going through menopause. The rest of the rules still apply pretty well. Does that answer your question? Okay. The next page I have is just a breakdown of some common protein sources, how many grams of fat or grams of protein fat are in there. So that can just be a reference sheet for you. You can also look them up online, MyFitnessPal, things like that are pretty easy to go through there. All right, so we're going to move on to fats. Is there any other questions on protein that I didn't cover, things that you want to know before we move on? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that was at the bottom of one of the other sheets. So it's around 1 gram per pound per day. We're going to come back to that, though, towards the end as to where we should set those numbers at again. So, yes, but we'll come back to it. Yeah. how quick do you want me to make this? We got plenty of time. I got all day. So yes, you've been told saturated fat's bad for you. Cholesterol is going to kill you. All of these type of things. I have articles on them I can reference you to for some of the studies that I've linked, things like that. But a lot of this, to be frank, is just propaganda. So most of these studies are correlation studies, and what anybody who's gone through science knows, they've gone through an undergrad degree, is correlation does not equal causation. Just because two variables go in the same direction does not mean that you can say that they caused it. A simple example for this would be like every time you go to a car accident, there's an ambulance there. Did the ambulance cause the car accident? Well, no, it's just there. It's going along with it, and it's got to be there every time because they're trying to do something. This has been a big thing with cholesterol, is that they are always present, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the root cause. So we have to kind of backtrack and to see what that root cause is. So correlation studies are not ideal. When we break these down into randomized clinical trials, which is where you take two groups and a blind group, or just two groups, and you give them red meat versus no red meat. There's been no clinical trials that have shown that red meat causes heart attacks, cancer, obesity. Any of the things that have been claimed do not show up when we look at these studies. I have plenty of them that I could send if people want to read them, but it doesn't even make sense evolutionarily. So if we look at like humans, where we came from, like we were hunter-gatherers. Like, if we had to go around just eating birds all the time, we would have not survived a tribe of 150 people. They'd have been dead. And if red meat caused all of these issues, like, humans wouldn't have survived. Like, that was a big part of our diet, was hunting this big game so that way we could feed our family. So I could go a bunch of different ways with that, but right now, and there won't be, the scientific literature does not show any issues with saturated fat or red meat. It comes far more from processed foods, processed vegetable oils, environmental toxins, a lot of these other things that we don't talk about as much because there's a lot more money behind processed food companies than there is the local farmer who's just raising a herd of cattle trying to feed his community. Anything else? I'm trying to tone down a little bit, not rant too much on it. Yeah. Yep. 100%. Yeah, they're just waste, but they got you. They got you to spend a lot of money on it. Marketing drives me insane. That's why I'm not trying to sell you guys anything today. Like we do a lot of things around here. Like, I would love for you guys to all come and train with me, but at the end of the day, like, I want you to know, like, here's the basics of how you guys can go out and change your life. If you want my help on the back end, if you want to train with me, great, happy to do that. But the information is here. You just need somebody to say, like, hey, all these other people are just trying to make money off of you and lie to you, and they're selling you other things. And when you start to break those things down, it just doesn't play out on the back end for human health. But I will derail this conversation for another 2.5 hours if I keep going that direction. So, fats. I don't love the word fat because of the association with body fat as well. These are lipids scientifically, but most people won't know what that means. So we're going to call them fats. As with protein, these are completely essential in our diet. Like, you cannot make protein, you cannot make fat in your body. So we have to be consuming these from our diet. And they're, again, another basic building block of our nervous system, of all of our hormones, our brain. Everything is based on these fat molecules. And if we have good fats versus bad fats coming in, that literally affects your cognitive abilities, your ability to function, your motor skills, your ability to think, Alzheimer's, some of these neurological conditions we have. A lot of this is predicated on the quality of your diet as well, because fat makes up such a essential part. It's 60% of the human brain mass. That's a lot. Like most of everything in your skull is made up of fat, which again is another reason why it drives me insane when people say that fat's bad for us when the body is literally made of it and we can't make it out of anything other than consuming it. But somehow fats are bad for us. But so this is also my struggle with low fat food products. We buy full fat all the time. Like and when it comes to meat, like I don't prefer like a 70-30. I just think it's greasy and kind of gross. Like those type of things, I'll do like an 85-15. But when it comes to dairy, some of these other things that we try to get full fat all the time because it's the least processed and it has a lot of the, again, other nutrients in there. When we have fat in our diet, there's so many nutrients that are lipid based, so they aren't water soluble. They need fat to get into our bloodstream, and when we eat the fat, it encapsulates those nutrients and then helps pull them across our digestive tract into our bloodstream. So I don't like low fat stuff. We already kind of touched on this as far as avoiding animal fats with higher saturated content. That's been shifted to where instead of focusing on the animal fats, we've now shifted to focusing on processed seed oils like canola, soy. I'll talk about those a little bit on the next page, but there has been, again, correlation, not causation. But since we've increased those, it has correlated with worse health outcomes that we've had. The only difference is that there's randomized clinical trials to back that up, unlike claims about animal proteins. So when we look at healthy fats, these are going to come from animal fats like grass-fed butters, tallow, ghee, dairy. Those are just to name a few. Plant fats that are great, coconut oil, avocado oil. There's a sustainability issue there. It does take a lot of water, but it's still a good oil. Olive oil is good, except for high heat cooking. It has a really low smoke point, so you don't want to stir fry an olive oil. You want to use it more for dressings on the back end after you're done with your cooking. Low temperature baking is okay, but we tend to use ghee, butter, avocado oil for a lot of our high heat cooking. You can use coconut oil. I just don't care for the taste as much when it comes to that, but that's a preference. Unhealthy fats, these are things like canola, corn, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, rice bran. There's also like 10 more now because people caught on to the fact that they're bad for you, so they just changed the name of them. Isn't that great? So now it's like hydrogenated vegetable oil, and then they have like rapeseed, and they just keep changing the names to confuse you. They've done this with sugar as well. There's like 20 different names for glucose now because they want to shift it so that way you don't recognize it when you're looking at their food label. But the problem with these is they're not real oils. I mean, they are after you send them through a high heat bleaching process, but also a lot of those, like you wouldn't even know how to get that oil. Like if you walked up to corn or soybeans or sunflower, like how are you going to get the oil out of that plant? We've all felt them in our hand, right? Like how do you get it out? If I give you a bunch of coconuts, avocados, and olive oil, you think you could manage to extract some fat from that? Yeah, you could smash it up, you could strain it, like the fat's going to come right out of there. You don't need anything else to process that. So that's one of my bigger rules of thumb. Like if you can't make it yourself, if you can't imagine like your ancestors or a farmer going out and doing it with minimal processing, probably shouldn't be consuming it. These are industrial oils. They are not just used for food consumption. They also use these oils as the base for things like motor oil, other products, petroleum. They use it for that type of stuff as well. They just have so much of it in excess that they're like, hey, what if we like have humans eat this too? Do you think it'll be good for them? Probably not. It's definitely been linked a lot to heart issues, cholesterol issues. And the way I often explain this to people is all of your cells in your body are like a house, and you have a wall built around them. These fats are more inflammatory. They're unstable, so their bonding's not as great. It's basically like instead of taking a bunch of bricks and lining the walls of your house, you're like, well, let's just grab some sticks and maybe we'll kind of like slap some mud on it. Hopefully they dry, and then they end up breaking, and we have dysfunction on the houses of our body, and then they lead to some of these issues. Especially, I go into my tangents. It's fine. Our blood vessels. So a lot of people that have these issues with cholesterol binding and the plaque buildup, that's because their blood vessels are weak. They've literally broken apart, and then the cholesterol goes in and it binds to help the healing process, so that way you don't have the leakage of blood just back into your body cavities. But some of this has been linked to like all of these seed oils starting to make up our fat, the walls of our cells, and then when we think about our nervous system and all the signals it has to send, and now it's like comprised of mostly these poor fat molecules, well, it's having a harder time sending those signals now too, because it's not based on the healthy fats that our bodies were meant to be consuming. So fats are healthy and essential if we choose the right sources. They should make up somewhere around 30 to 50% of your total caloric intake. That varies a lot depending on people. We'll talk about that later. Animal fats are essential to our health, and avoid processed vegetable oils like the plague. The only people that are going to tell you not to do that are processed food companies or people that are being paid by processed food companies, which I'm not, so I don't mind telling you that they're awful. All right, any questions over the fat side of things? Okay, so carbohydrates, these are quick fuel sources. They come from fruits, grains, vegetables. We break them down into glucose, and this is used primarily for intense bouts of exercise, quick contractions. It's often said that glucose is a primary fuel source, but that's because the mechanisms in our mitochondria are based on the glucose starting the fire, so it's like the kindling of the fire, but fat is like the logs that you put on the fire. So they're your long-term sustainable energy source. Most of you, as you're sitting here, you're burning far more fat than you are glucose. So it's important, but it's actually a molecule that we can create within our own body. If you consume enough protein and fat, you don't have to eat carbohydrates. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, but it makes sense when we think about humans as time goes throughout the year during the winter months. We're pretty far close to there not being any vegetation out there at all, right? Like there's no fruits left, so we had to go through these times where we didn't have a lot of carbs, so our body figured out how to make those. Again, doesn't mean we shouldn't eat them, just the context of the priority of them in our diet, because we've tended to prioritize carbohydrates. A lot of people eat upwards of 200 grams of carbohydrates a day, when it might not be essential for us to eat that much. So some of the benefits, though, of if you are eating carbs in an appropriate amount is improved cognitive function, muscle sparing. So if you don't have enough glucose in your bloodstream, you'll start to break down protein to make up for that glucose, which would be okay if you have an excess of protein, but if you don't, that can run into issues. When we look at how many of these we should be eating, we got to look at the context of your current body composition. Do you have any chronic diseases, comorbidities? What is your activity level? And what are your overall goals? That'll dictate how many carbohydrates you're eating quite a bit. To touch on that a little bit, so the higher the body fat percentage that we have, the lower we want our carbohydrates to be. So that helps us get more into burning more fat for fuel. Making sure that we're not getting too many excess calories and focusing on some more of the essential nutrients. Diseases, comorbidities, some of those, a lot of times people do better with lower carbohydrate diets. But for athletes, people that are pretty lean, that want to put on muscle mass, that have maybe they're running marathons, maybe not marathons are the best example, but competing in like higher intensity bouts of exercise, then having a lot of carbohydrates can be great for them. Can be very useful for those type of people. So on the next page, high quality versus low quality carbohydrates. So highest quality are going to be sweet, non-sweet fruits, fermented vegetables. White rice is okay in like moderation, roots, tubers. Um, then on the lower carbohydrate quality carbohydrates, we have like refined grains, added sugars, and I put vegetables on there too. I'm gonna explain though. It doesn't mean all vegetables. So when we think about plants, they have parts of the plant that they want us to eat versus parts that they don't want us to eat. So when we go to hunt a deer has the opportunity to sprint away from us. Like if you're a hunter, you're going for that deer, its defense mechanism is, I see you, I'm getting out of here. When we go to look at plants, they don't have that defense mechanism. They're rooted into the ground, they're stuck there, and they want to keep thriving and surviving. So what plants have done is created these defense chemicals in them to where if you take parts of them and eat them, they will signal to the other plants. They've done this with giraffes and acacia trees, that if the giraffe is chewing on the tree down here, all of the trees downstream, because they have this dense connected network through the mycelium, it's fascinating. They can signal a change in the trees downstream to change their profile so that way the giraffe will stop eating them. They get bitter to where the giraffe's like, nope, I'm good. I don't want to eat that anymore. We'll move on to another group of trees. Plants have this as well. So the main thing is like when we look at a plant, like what part, if you look at a tree or that's a fruiting tree, do they want you to eat? Well, they signal with the bright fruits. Like they really want you to eat the fruits of the tree. That's why they're vibrant. You see them really well. They're not camouflaged. Not that plants are necessarily camouflaging themselves, but they're just duller. They're not vibrant. So those are the parts that they really want us to eat. They have very low defense chemicals in them. They offer a lot of micronutrients. The vegetables like stems, leaves, roots, they can be a little bit trickier because that's the structural components of the plant. It doesn't really want you to rip out its roots because then it can no longer like pass on its genetic material. It's dead. It's gone. So this doesn't mean that we don't eat vegetables. But what the context of this and why I always say that it's tolerance dependent is because people with digestive issues, comorbidities, like autoimmune issues, they actually do really well when they cut things like kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, like all of these vegetables that are told to be really great for us. They start to do better when they cut those things out. Their digestive issues go away. They get their autoimmune issues in check. So all I'm getting at there is just to make you mindful of it, not to say to stop eating vegetables, because there's a lot of people that tolerate spinach, kale just fine, and they love it, and it tastes great and awesome. Keep eating it. But if you're somebody that falls into that camp of autoimmune issues or lots of digestive issues, like you have pain, gas, bloating all the time, it could be something to pay attention to as to what might be causing that after you get rid of all processed food. But we still come to whole foods first, but if you're still having those issues while you're eating whole foods, it might make sense to start to look at some of these as well as causing you issues. However, fermented vegetables, like things like kimchi, sauerkraut, same idea as like the animals, how they ferment foods, the plants better, and they upcycle those nutrients. When we ferment vegetables, we actually tolerate them better. So those can be really great for not only the nutrient absorption, but the bacteria in your gut as a prebiotic as well. But it just kind of depends. On the Whole Food Index, I have them kind of listed out a little bit more with more examples. So I always do that just to kind of get people's attention as to why is he telling me not to eat vegetables, but to kind of reel it back in to say, like, you can. Context matters, though, and it depends on who you are, what you're struggling with, what you're not struggling with, as to how much of them you consume. But again, carbs are not the enemy, but if they're low quality, they might be. I still think that if we eat most of our quality carbs from sweet and non-sweet fruits, so things like zucchini, squash, pumpkin, those are all actually fruits. They're not vegetables. We eat those all the time. I love butternut squash. It was fantastic. And then you got to determine your carbs based on your goals. Yes. Yeah. So my wife actually makes sourdough bread, which I think is the best of the breads when you're looking at grains. And again, the reason is that sourdough is fermented. It's an active culture, so it's constantly fermenting. You have to let it sit out for a long time, so it tends to be easier to digest. When it comes to just your standard grains that you're getting at the store, breads that you're buying from the store, they're just a processed food product. Most loaves of bread have like 20 or more ingredients in them, which is crazy. Like the bread my wife makes has 5 ingredients in it. So if we're bringing things into the home, if we're making them ourselves, I think grains, pastas can be good, and we've done that a lot with our boys. But if you're getting them out and about, probably not great. One of the other issues that they have is enriched flour. So they put tons of folate into these flours, which, without spending a lot of time going down what issues that causes, it has a lot of issues for people that have ADHD tendencies, autism, things like that. It diminishes their level of nutrients like homocysteine, or increases their homocysteine levels, and makes it harder for them to uptake B vitamins. So I don't love them. I don't think that they are essential as far, the food pyramid at this point is just another marketing tool. But really, if we flip that food pyramid over, we get to a better sense of health with people. So again, not to say to take your grains away, but we just might need to be more intentional about what grains we're consuming to help facilitate our health. A lot. 100%. Like heirloom pastas are so much better. So the GMOs, the way we've modified our crops, has a huge component in that. So again, that to me is like when you're searching out these things from a high quality standpoint, like they can be part of our diet. Years ago, like, and especially before I had kids, like I was much more like hard no, none of like I don't think we should eat any of it. And now like having them, finding options for them so they're not just eating meat and fruit all the time, even though they love that. We've started to look into this, and there are ways to do it. And over in Europe, they process their grains way better. They're not trying to maximize crop production. They're actually growing the crops for food in a more beneficial way. So yes, if you can do some of that stuff, it definitely plays out to be a little bit better. All right, so that's kind of the overview. Proteins, fats, carbs is what we're really making up our diet. This next page is determining where we're at for macronutrient targets, caloric consumption. How do I go through this with a client to decide like how much food I'm recommending that they eat? There's utility in this. But if this part gets overwhelming for you, if it feels like it's too much, you don't know how to get there, it's stressful, like this is not that important. All the stuff I talked about prior and what we'll do after this, as far as like what should our meals look like, that's important. Eating whole foods is most important. Making sure that you're cutting out the BS out of your diet and you're focusing on quality, that's going to get you 85, 95% of the way there. And then if you don't get to where you feel great, like we can start to dive into a little bit more of like making sure your macros are appropriate. So we'll go through this, but don't get overwhelmed. The main point is after, as far as structuring those meal plans and making sure that we hit enough protein, of course. So just to recap, the protein, we want between 0.8 and 1.2 grams of per pound of body weight, ideal body weight, or a lean mass, depending on what metrics you have. Fat and carbs are a sliding scale, or like a teeter-totter. So if fats go up, carbs have to come down. If carbs go up, fats have to come down. And that's where we run into issues with either of them, is more so when we keep both of them high and we have protein pretty low, which is most processed foods. So those got to balance. This is the formula that I go through. So basal metabolic rate, this is how many calories do you burn at rest. So if you're just laying in bed all day, what amount of calories does your body have to consume to sustain function? So you take your body weight, you divide it by 2.2. That's a little typo. 2.2 is what you're supposed to divide it by, because that changes into kilograms, and then you multiply that by 20. That gives you however many calories you're going to burn at rest. And then after that, is anyone doing that right now? Want me to pause? Okay. I'll give you a second to do it before I move on. Multiply it by 20. So it should get you somewhere in the like 1 to 2,000s, depending.
Okay.
Divide by 2 point, body weight divided by 2.2, and then multiplied by 20. No, this is current. So this is just trying to get an idea of where you're at right now. Oh no, 2.2. I was saying that I forgot the 0.2 on there. I see where that was confusing. Calories. All of these are in calories. So after that, we have the thermic effect of feeding. So like I was talking about with protein, how it takes more calories to break it down. The thermic effect of feeding is roughly 10% of your total calories. So if you ate 2,000 calories throughout the day, roughly 200 of those calories are just going to breaking down the food you consumed. If you don't have a food log, you don't know how many calories you're eating. Normally, that one's a little bit harder. I kind of estimate based on how many calories you're eating throughout the day, or you can kind of go to where, like, how many calories we think we need to eat, and then based upon that. Exercise energy expenditure. This is between 200 and 500 calories. So those people that are at the gym 5-6 days a week, they're probably closer to 500 calories. If you're going for like just some walks, resistance training a little bit, you might be in the middle. And then people that just have sedentary jobs that don't exercise are going to be like really on the low end, or non-existent if you don't actually do any exercise. Yes. I would probably, based on your intensity, put you around like 350, I would say. But again, it's just an estimate. These would be something that you'd modify over time. Like, say you really nailed all of this down, you were doing it perfectly, you lost a few pounds, you hit a plateau, then you're just going to readjust. So it's just a starting point. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. This is your activity levels throughout the day. So if you have a sedentary job, it's going to be pretty low. If you are a manual labor person, it's probably going to be pretty high because you're moving all day throughout work. So you just kind of judge it based on your activity levels throughout your work day. And then at the end, it's just a summation of all of those into your estimated total daily energy expenditure. So after you have that, that one, I think, again, based on what I was talking about earlier, it's going to be really interesting to maybe spend a day or 2 days tracking how much food you eat, putting it into a MyFitnessPal or one of those apps, and just seeing like where do I roughly land at, and then how does that compare to what my estimated energy expenditure is throughout the day. Because if those numbers are vastly different, then we might have to have a different conversation about how do we slowly kind of work your calories back in and change things for you. Because if you're only eating 1,200 calories a day and it's putting you over 2,000 calories and you really need to be closer to 1,800 a day, 600 more calories, that's a lot of food to intake throughout a day. So it's going to have to be a little bit of a stepwise process to get you there. It's not going to be something you can do overnight. Next one, so looking at our macros and then starting to work into a meal plan. So protein, this is how many grams that you need throughout the day. So whatever that ideal number is, or ideal body weight is for you, or using your lean body mass, multiplying it by 1 to 1.2 to get to that grams of protein per day is how we come to that number. And if anyone wants to go through this and you're getting stuck on the math or anything, like, we can go through it at the end too, so you can leave with a good idea of where those might need to be at. And again, if it's stressful and you don't want to do any of that, then it's just here for future information. Carbohydrates. So this one, I put some kind of classifications around here. If you're like, we're not high school athletes, we're general population, really 150 grams a day is what I would consider a high intake of carbohydrates. Moderate would be around 100 and low would be around 50. So the way you're going to determine this is if your body composition's pretty good, you're right where you want to be at, then you might be able to go moderate to high. If you have a little bit of weight to lose, but you're not too concerned, you might want to be around the moderate range. If you feel like you have a lot of weight to lose and you want to speed that up, you might be more towards the low end as far as carbohydrates go. So for most people, I typically start them around, I would say, 100 to 120 grams of carbs a day, because most people are coming off of really high carb diets, and I don't want it to be such a dramatic shift that it's not sustainable for them. So I want you to have enough carbs in your diet that you still feel satisfied and you feel like you're not missing out, but not too many, so that way we can start to find a happy medium for a sustainable amount of them for you. And then from there, you're just utilizing whatever's left over for fat to make up the rest of your calories for the day. So whatever percentage that works out to, then we just use the rest for fats. I would say a lot of people end up somewhere between 90 to 120 grams of fat, depending on where their carbs are at. But 100, 110 is probably a safe estimate to start you out there. So from a meal planning side of things, you want to simply pick a protein source, a fat source, and a carb source at each meal. And one thing I also like to talk about is keeping your meals simple, 3 to 5 ingredients, and the recipes that I have at the end also fall within that for 3 to 5 ingredients. This is twofold. So if you have sensitivities with digestion, or you're trying to figure out food tolerances, what things bother you, what things do well with you, what things give you more energy versus take away your energy, you need to keep things simple. If you have 10, 15, 20 ingredients in a meal, you have no idea what's actually causing any of these things that you're feeling. But if you can keep things to 3 to 5 ingredients, then you can start to take a log or a mental note of, like, I didn't really feel good. Okay, what was in the last few meals for the day? Maybe that doesn't happen. Then you come to it a few days later, it happens again, and you can start to pinpoint, like, oh, it might be that, and then I can pull that out and re-experiment with it. So that helps just from a sensitivity to food standpoint, but also from overall caloric load. So if you have 10, 15 ingredients at a meal, like, it's much easier to eat a lot more. It's kind of like the people that are food competition eaters, where they just are like eating hot dogs and they get to the point where they can't eat anymore, so they start eating French fries because the change in the palate helps them eat more hot dogs on the back end. It's kind of the same idea with our food. If we have tons of ingredients in a meal, the variety in the palate tricks our brain, so we start to consume more than we would have if we kept it really simple. I guess another thing too with that is it also helps you prioritize protein a little bit more when you have less fats and carbs at your meal, because then you can make that more of the center point and then use those for the additional sides as well. So the next page is where we'll kind of start to break down, like, what this can look like. The page after that, that whole food index, this is just, it's not all encompassing. There's more foods than what are on here, but these are some of the staples that I use in my diet and with my clients. So you have a list of proteins, a list of fats, a list of carbohydrates, and something simple to do is go through, for if you're going to eat 3 meals a day, is pick a protein. What protein do you have that's easy for you to make, that you have prepped, and put that as the main point for each of your meals. I would say for most of you, without running through the numbers, you're going to be 6 ounces of protein at a minimum, probably closer to 8 ounces as a goal at each meal. And that will get you, if you did that, that would get you somewhere around, if all that was your only protein throughout the day was those, would get you around like 120 or so grams of protein. Personally, I eat about 2 meals a day, big meals a day, and I'll probably end up with like 12 to 16 ounces of meat at a meal. I don't recommend that. I have different goals, but like just like that's what I mean when I'm saying prioritize protein. So pick your protein for each of your meals. Look over that list and think of like what would be something that sounds good for breakfast, or that would be simple for me to make at breakfast. Pick one for lunch, dinner. To touch on this a little bit while you're looking over that list, is I wrote an article on this about meal like prepping not too long ago, but it's very unsustainable, at least from what I found, for people to prep their meals for a full week. Like we do these Sunday meal preps, and you get all these containers, and then you put it all in the fridge, and it takes so much work. I've only seen people be successful with that for maybe a week, 2 weeks. So when it comes to prepping your food, I tend to prep on Sundays and Wednesdays, and I will make a lot of protein on both of those days, so it feeds us for the next few days. So that way we have fresh meat in the fridge, we can come out, or boiled eggs or something like that, and we can warm them up really quick and have our protein. But if you are trying to do your protein prep every single day and you have a job or kids, like it's just not going to work out. You're going to end up skipping, you're going to have low protein days. So if you're going to prep stuff, that's what I suggest. Prep the protein. That'll save you a lot of time because it's so much easier to grab some fruit, boil some rice, or add something else that's simple to take out of the fridge, like a vegetable. So think about that when you're kind of going through creating your meal plan. As far as fat sources go, this is going to be a little bit different depending on how much fat you need to consume for the day, but also what types of meats or protein you're picking. So if your main protein for your meal is chicken, you have to realize that, and you can go back to the prior one where I had the breakdown of how much is in there, but it has very low fat. Beef, like an 80-20 beef, is about a 1-to-1 ratio. If you have 20 grams of protein in there, you're probably closer to 20 grams of fat. But chicken, you might have 20 grams of protein and like 5 grams of fat. So you might have to compensate for that with whatever healthy fats you're picking at that meal. And then carbs, like mornings, lunches, I do tend to put more fruits towards the beginning of the day. They tend to stabilize blood sugar just a little bit more. They're quick, they're easy, and then for dinners is where, like personally, I'll eat more of the starchier carbs, like if we have sourdough bread or we have rice or something like that. I'll put those more towards the dinner as well. And then if you have, you might have, like you have 3 to 5 ingredients. So you have one protein source, sometimes 2, but mostly 1. A fat source, and then the carbs are where you could have a few multiple sources in there if you wanted to do a few different vegetables or some squash or something like that. And then that would make up about your 5 ingredients for your meal. Yeah, not really. I think they're a better source of fat than they are a protein source. When we look at the digestibility scores of them, they're relatively low for most nuts. So, and the other thing that I found is back to our conversation around like not eating as many stems, leaves if you have digestive issues. I've also found that people that eat nuts and seeds, if they have digestive issues, those are big triggers for them. So that one, if you do eat them, I think like macadamia nuts, almonds, pecans are some of the better ones, but it's very person dependent, and I would look at it more as a fat source than I would a protein source. Oh, yes, thank you for that. I think he probably knows. He's just provoking me to talk about it. So, brown rice has been shown to have higher chemical contamination in there, heavy metals. It's not as great for our digestibility. I think white rice is a little bit cleaner source. I think there was actually like studies showing arsenic in some brown rice sources. So I prefer white rice. I think it's a little bit cleaner, non-enriched. We go to Sam's. There's like a 25-pound bag. It's yellow, but it's not enriched. It's just plain jasmine white rice. I think most people do pretty well with that. As far as rice goes, so this is where we want to be mindful of like where do you feel like you land at? Do you feel like you can tolerate more carbs or less? And I would probably say like maybe a third to a half a cup might be a good serving of rice. But if your goal is to lose more body fat, then while you're trying to do that, you might want to keep the grains just a little bit less and focus more on the proteins, fats, fruits, things like that. Oh, no, no, I don't. There. Oh, where do I want to go with this? I So my youngest had he had some digestive issues. Didn't tolerate dairy for the longest time, so we did oat milk with him, and it just pained me. Um, uh, but for his sake, digestively, it actually did pretty well out of all of them. But they're not. They're just water. Like they literally just beat the useless parts of the almonds, like the shucks or the what's left over from the oats that they didn't want to take into putting into actual packages. And then they add water and they fortify it with nutrients that we don't really need. There's probably other chemicals in there. I'd have to look back at some of the studies, but there's no real nutrient value into it. So I don't recommend it too much. Coconut milks can be better because there's actual coconut in those. If you don't like dairy, I get it. Like, if you don't want to consume dairy, that's fine. But I haven't really found any of them that I feel like I would say, are beneficial. Now, if it's a cooking thing here and there, and you need a little bit of it, then I can see that. I just would. I think with all of these things, I'm talking about some of the vegetables and these other things, that it doesn't mean never. I want people to be mindful of that not making up a bulk of what you're eating. Like, keep it like moderation or even less than moderation, and you'll be okay. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Yes, ma'am. Mhm. It's not environmentally sustainable. Yeah. Um, there's a fantastic book called Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf, um, where they break down agriculture and their big premises. We've heard a lot about how cows are terrible for the environment between the methane and the water they consume, and it's disappointing because the statistics just literally are not there to support it. But this book does a fantastic job of just breaking down all of that and what is actually sustainable in our environment for food production versus what isn't, and how agricultural practices make a huge impact onto that. Like, one thing I've always said, that is, if I end up having lots of money when I'm older, I'm going to buy up farmland that's for sale and just turn it back into nature. Like these big farm fields of just corn and soy and wheats that are destroying the soil and not really providing us any nutrients. Like, I would love to just buy those up and turn them back into grass and raise animals on it, or just let nature do its thing there, because it's not great for the environment. It had a purpose And we can't look past that, because we wouldn't be here with industry if we didn't have farming and they didn't go through that time. But now we know better, and we need to start doing better as well, progressing ourselves towards actual sustainable agricultural practices. So I don't hate on the people that started it, because they needed to start it. That's how we got to where we are, but not really beneficial anymore. You got a question back there? You're just holding the hand up. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Mhm. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and even at that, I kind of go back in my own head as to where you said, well, is protein the first part? And I'm instantly like, yes. And then I'm also like, well, maybe. Is that going to be the easiest thing for you to implement? Like, there's so many things. I work on with my clients about this all the time. There's so many directions that we can go towards the direction of better health. What are the ones that appeal to you the most, that you feel like are going to be the easiest thing for you to implement? And if I'm just saying logically, as far as what one thing do I think would have the biggest impact, getting your protein up to where it needs to be, yes, I do think that would have the biggest impact. But it also has to make sense to you, and it has to be something that you're willing to do, because that is what really creates a sustainability. Is find the thing that you can build a habit with, and then build upon that as you go. With that, I would say yes, increasing protein. Subsequent steps could be something like making sure that you're getting enough water in for the day. So, like, that's something I didn't mention. It's on this next page, actually, of these basic lifestyle guidelines. Um, so these are all things that are just as essential as our nutrients and the nutrition that we're intaking, but these are the lifestyle in which we live. So things like getting half your body weight in ounces a day, going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, creating a nice calm sleep environment for yourself, moving every day, some days intentionally, some days just for blood flow, getting out into the sunshine, making sure that you're sitting down to digest your food. We didn't talk about food environments, but one thing we often do is we eat our food while we're watching TV or staring at our phone, or we're rushing from one place to the other. We don't often sit down with our family and connect over a meal, which I don't think is great for us. So all I'm getting at is that there's a lot of other things that you can also do that will have great impacts on your health. Pick the ones that resonate with you the most, and when you get really good at them, pick something else, and that'll get that train rolling. And 6, 8, 9 months down the road, you'll realize that you added 5 things and they all stuck. Does that help? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go. Yes. Like just getting exercise in, as far as that goes. Um, yeah, I'm simple things like, yeah. So one thing, yeah, that's fair. So Austin creates a workout of the week every week that we send out on Fridays. I've been doing that for like 30. I think we're on like 35 or something like that. So Yeah, so quite a few of those where they're minimal equipment, like it could be something that you have like a 20-pound kettlebell that you get from the Walmart because that's accessible to you. But you just something simple like that that you can do these things from home. We have a free ebook on there that's about 3 workouts, kind of structures a week as well. That's linked in those. It's just online. I'll send you some links to these. But it's just a ebook style, so it's like a PDF, but it goes through, and then we have all these videos on YouTube where there are movements that you can watch the video of one of us doing the movement and then replicate it as well. But yeah, I think one thing people miss too is just walking. Like walking is so powerful. It's something that humans were designed to do. Like we're really good at walking, but we take it for granted. So if people can, like, even if it's, I can only tolerate 10 minutes and I'm going to do that for a week, a couple times. And then next week I'm going to go to 15. But working yourself up to being able to walk for an hour at a time can do wonders, especially alongside of the nutrition, and getting that in line. But I'll send you some resources for that as well. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. If it's your normal, then your body is adjusted to it. Is it important that you're doing that? Yes. Does it have benefits to your overall health and stamina? Yes. Is it going to be what drives the change from where you are now for the next 6 months? No, because you're used to it. So it's still important. It's still beneficial that you're hitting those step goals and that you're staying active. But to really drive that change, we got to add a few other things in there to be the catalyst for that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that they're something that we should prioritize. However, if you're going on a road trip, if you're time crunched, if there's something to where it's that versus getting something sugary processed more so, better, right? And there's also ones if you look at the packaging, you can get the ones with minimal ingredients where there's less in there. But just like when we talked about the whey protein earlier, it's going to get you the protein source, not a lot of the micronutrients, the vitamins that we need as well. So at times, it can work as a bridge to when you can get more regular meat in as well. Process like deli meats. What other questions do we have? How long did I take? Oh, it's only 11:30. That's not too bad. I can talk for hours, so I'm surprised. It's really your guys' energy level. I got all day. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I actually talked about, I think having my wife Jessica and our 3 boys, that shifted me so much because prior to that, and some of the people that work here could testify to that, or my sister over there as well. I was very like hyper focused on you need to eat meat, like you need to resistance train all the time, you need to do cardio, you need to like I had so many of these things that were just like, you have to do this. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't do all of these things. And what I've realized over the last few years is that there's a lot more balance to be had. Like being a parent's tough. Like you're not going to have time to hit workouts really hard all the time. You're going to have meals that aren't ideal. Your kid's going to really ask you to take a bite of something, and he's saying it so sweet that you're like, screw it, it's fine, right? So I find that that's been my bigger thing, is realizing that there is balance in life, and it's okay to have some more carbs or less optimal things here and there, and that's not going to be the detriment to the bigger picture, as long as most of your habits and your focus is along what we're kind of talking about today, and that makes up the bulk of it. But you have time to not be so strict and to enjoy life as well. Yes. Sure. Yeah. So just from physiology standpoint, water, of course, it hydrates us, but it maintains your blood pressure, your blood volume. It helps bring nutrients along with you in your digestive tract. It provides hydrogen and oxygen to our body as well. So some of our metabolism is dependent on those molecules that we need to get from that. It maintains cellular volumes, which are important for enzymes and other things moving through. So there's tons of like micro stuff that water is super essential for. Um, Moving out a little bit, like your brain fog, appetite suppression. Like if you feel like you're tired a lot, you're getting a lot of brain fog, sometimes that can be dehydration. Sometimes you might feel hungrier because you're not consuming enough water and you're dehydrated, because really a lot of our water actually comes from the food we eat as well. So it can kind of trick us into thinking that we need more food when really what we need is more water. But from the standpoint of, can you drink other things? What else is acceptable? Coffees, teas, still to me fall under the pay attention if you have digestive issues, if you have some of those type of things, or if you get anxious, if you have a lot of anxiety. Caffeine specifically can be a big trigger for that. There's ways to mitigate it, but choosing higher quality sourcing is essential. So one thing for me is I noticed I had a lot of digestive issues with drinking coffee in college, and then I realized, like, I started to dive into it a little bit more, and they have a lot of molds, pesticides, other things that can be in these coffees, as well as fillers. So I switched to a better brand. A lot of that went away, felt great. So be mindful of the quality sourcing that you're getting. Caffeine, if it's a regular intake, say you have a cup of coffee every day, or 3 cups, the water you're getting in there doesn't, it does technically count towards your fluid intake for the day. And if it's a normal for you, the caffeine won't dehydrate you. Caffeine can be a diuretic, but that's when we take like caffeine pills or that have higher doses of caffeine but with no water associated with it. Then it acts more as a diuretic versus just having it in coffees, teas. But that still doesn't mean that you want that to count towards your half your body weight in ounces a day. You still want that to be essential number to hit. Other things, like there's like kombucha teas that can be good for digestion. I really try to tell people though to not drink your calories. If your goal is to lose weight, drinking your calories is kind of wasteful because you're not getting a lot of nutrients for them. Even in the sense of people make these big smoothies and things, juices that they get tons of sugar and calories in, but they're not actively chewing the food. And if you sat all that food in front of you, like if you can consume it while it's sitting in front of you, you probably shouldn't be drinking it as well. One thing that is important when we talk about water, since we're here, is getting electrolytes in as well. So whether that's adding sea salt to your food or putting an electrolyte packet into your water, those can be essential, especially when you start to cut out processed food, because there's so much sodium in all these foods. Sodium's not bad for us, but having too much pure sodium can be bad for us, but salts in general are still good. Those help hydrate you as well. So the water and the salts need each other to get across the bloodstream. So making sure that we're adding salts back into our food will help with like muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog as well, when you're starting to shift away from some of these processed foods. I don't think it's bad for you. There is data to show that in the prevention or of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, some of these neurological conditions, that having a little bit of caffeine in there can help stimulate the nervous system to not be as predisposed to something like that. So I don't think it's bad overall. Where I do think it's not great is people that, again, have digestive issues or people that suffer from a lot of anxiety. I would definitely cut it out in those aspects because it's not helping you from that standpoint. What other questions do we have? I think I'm done. I don't think I had anything else. There's recipes on here that you guys can look over. The basic lifestyle guidelines. I did put a piece in there about the training that we do, our 6-week experience through floor coaching. If anyone set up a consult, I was going to offer you guys a discount today. If that's something you're interested in, we could talk more after. But I'm open to as many questions as you guys have. If you have more, if I've talked enough and overwhelmed your brain and you need to process it and be done, that's okay too. Thank you. That was a lot for me to break it down into that. I had probably many more pages. My brain just keeps going. So, yes, I would be very open to that, especially with the turnout we had here. I'm very pleased with that. I could talk about this stuff for like 4 more hours. So, if that's something that you guys are interested in, and there's certain topics you want to dive into, not only from this, but I write articles that I send out weekly through email that talk about these type of topics. So I'm open to suggestions on things you guys want to hear about from there as well. So, are you leaving? I got a question. I thought he was leaving. Sorry. Okay, bye. Yes, ma'am. No, you're fine. Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. You're what? Yeah, absolutely. I had more meals that I came up with. I just, for the sake of this not being a 50-page packet, I figured that could be something that I can throw together and put like a little quick ebook around days of eating, that type of stuff as well. So it was more for the, I'd already done a couple hours. So I was like, this is going to be forever if I actually put all my thoughts out. Yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah, I would love to do something like that. I definitely think we can continue to expand upon all of these topics in the future. I was thinking probably, like scheduling wise, maybe like do another one in January time, right after the new year. That tends to be good timing for people to think about these things as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I think if you guys can all tell your husbands to come, then I will get a lot of people. So, yeah, I agree. I've shifted a lot of my focus. So when because I do a lot of our marketing stuff, things that you see that go out. I'm doing a lot of that as well. The main group of people that listen to me are 35 to 60-year-old women. So most of my message focuses, you do, right? And so that really has become kind of my niche. I would love to talk to men, especially being a father, and what that means to me, and helping men also like go along that when it comes to fitness and nutrition, and being role models for their sons and daughters. Like, that is something that I'm passionate about. I just haven't had a good success as far as like outside of a few one-on-one clients where I can work on that. As the masses, it's a little bit tougher to get them in here, but I'm open to it. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Sure. That's fine, right? Uh, sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, I agree. I did a series of articles on that last fall as well, moving into the holiday season, what that kind of looks like. So I'll probably do something similar. What's that? Yes. So I actually, can you, on my desk, there's a couple of the sheets with the QR codes on them. I forgot to bring them out. I have a couple sheets with some QR codes for you guys to scan that's got a lifestyle ebook that I wrote, a nutrition ebook, both of which are pretty lengthy as well. Nutrition one will be a good complement to the things we talked about today, more long thoughts on that. Lifestyle, as far as like that basic lifestyle guidelines, but I break all of those down. There's a link to my blog page that's on our website. If any of you want that aren't getting my emails but want to, feel free to give me your email today and I can add you to the list, so that way you start to get those. And then a Google review on there if anyone feels like they enjoyed their time today and would like to put up a review, that'd be great. But he's going to grab those so you guys can scan those QR codes and have some links to that stuff as well. I had some that were digestibility. There's some that are on there as examples of like how much protein's in 4 ounces of meat. Is that more what you're asking? Yeah, that one's in there as well under the protein section. Do, do, do. Anything else? Yes. They should be under my computer. When you're stuck. So what do I do, or what I think you should do? We don't leave the house without a lunchbox ever. We have like, whether it's cheese wheels, higher quality jerky, boiled eggs, fruits. We'll have protein shakes, things like that. I also, because I don't like microwaves, it's another thing. I just eat cold meat all the time, so that doesn't bother me. So I'll just literally take a container of beef with me and eat that. What I suggest to people is like find high quality jerkies that like don't have a lot of processed things in them. Those can be really good to get some protein in while you're going. Freeze dried fruit is something that we have with the boys all the time. So those type of things. If you are absolutely stuck and you have to go to a restaurant, just pick the thing that has the most meat in it, knowing that you're going to get some processed oils. It's not the best quality, but you can at least get protein and just save yourself from eating all the other BS that might come with it. And that's about the best you can do. You'd also be surprised at how much you can actually tell the people to make you something specific and be like, hey, no, actually, I don't. I just want like some burger patties and whatever vegetables you have. Keep the bun, keep everything else. Most of them will actually do something like that if you're willing to ask for it. But for us, we just don't leave the house without food because we have little gremlins and they get crazy if they haven't ate. Really, I would say it's probably just preference based. There's like they just fall into the starches, the grains for me. Nutrient wise, they're going to be about the same. But yeah, I don't really think there's too much. Sweet potatoes have more fiber in them, so I guess you could say that. For me, I don't digest sweet potatoes very well, so I digest the white potatoes actually better. So I don't prefer all of that fiber, but I would say they're kind of interchangeable. So when it comes to that, what actually does better is if you heat up the. You guys still can't find them. Maybe they're in my backpack. I don't know. That's my bad. No big deal. If you heat them up, the resistant starches in them after they cool down, actually you have less of a glycemic response to them. But who wants to eat a cold potato, right? This is where I think squash is actually fantastic. And if you have a butternut squash and you put a little like grass-fed butter or rub some avocado oil on it, bake it for 40 minutes in the oven, it tastes fantastic, just like a sweet potato. So that would, honestly, if I was going to say anything, that would be the better option than that, especially if you're diabetic. But